Ladies and gentlemen, cinematographer, director of photography, Hoyte van Hoytema, and composer Ludwig Göransson.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
I really want to say, I want to start with a sincere thank you guys for flying in just for this screening. I'm joking, they did not just fly in for this screening. No, but seriously, a huge thank you to Universal for partnering up and doing this tonight in this IMAX theater, which is really just the way to watch this film. So I have a million questions for the two of you, but I am going to open it up to the audience at a certain point. When did you both realize, wait a minute, this movie is going to be huge in terms of with critics and with audiences, and just have, resonate with so many people and just loving the movie?
I guess it wasn't until it was. I took the whole summer off, and I spent the whole summer in Sweden, and I went to a small little village, and I remember the day before the movie came out, I bought my tickets, and that little theater in that little small town was sold out. And that's, I think, when I realized that people were very interested in this movie.
You didn't think that could have been because of you?
No, because the day before the screening, I was out in the town, that little village, and my wife Serena, she saw some kids in all pink, mm-hmm. and she was like, "Oh, look. They decided they're gonna go to a Barbie movie," and then she saw some other guys back of them that had like dark clothes on and was smoking a cigarette, and she was like, "Oh, they're not gonna go to Oppenheimer." And she went up and asked them like, "Are you guys gonna see Oppenheimer?" And they didn't know what she was talking about.
Yeah, I had an interview at 9:00 in the morning at the Chinese, and there was literally like people posting outside with fedoras and smoking cigarettes. I was like, but to be serious, this film was not very obvious that it would get the response that it got. I mean, it's effectively people talking and people talking about science and so when it started to get a little traction, it was a bit surprising, I think. A very pleasant surprise in many ways. And of course, we did everything to make the story as palatable as we could. And Chris always had a very strong faith in that this was going to work. And we kind of always, follow his lead in this. But it was a very pleasant surprise, yeah.
A lot of people in this theater know how the sausage is made. They know the behind the scenes of making movies. What were some of the unique challenges you guys faced in bringing up this film to life?
Well, for me, it's very much about that. And that is, on a script level already, you're working with faces and dialogue, it's on paper, it's not a very obvious cinematic experience. So I think for me, the biggest challenge was, from the outset and from the start to create something that has the scope, but also has the kind of the dynamics in terms of its visuals, right? Because, a close-up is like, it's like playing an open chord on the guitar normally when you or the crescendo in a piece of music. It's like the biggest chord is the close-up, and if you put a lot of them next to each other in a film, it can become monotonous, and you can lose your dynamics a little bit. So for me, that was very much the challenge to keep faces and keep close-ups interesting and keep them dynamic enough so that you could sort of sit through the movie and go through the sort of the different peaks and low points as you would in a normal film,
Yeah, I think with the music, it was like I started right after I read the script, and you know the music needs to make the audience feel like you're in his shoes. You're seeing the world through his eyes. You're feeling what he's feeling, and you're not sitting there judging him. You're with the character the whole time with Oppenheimer, and so that I always knew after I read the script that the essence and the most important part is to get the emotional core of the music to really, you know, to really work with his character and all the different states of emotions that he goes through. And that was for me the most challenging part, because he is such an incredibly complex character and he has so many complex feelings, and try to go there, you know, I need to try to go there myself and try in terms of trying to get that out, and that was difficult at times.
And you going there, meaning you had to learn quantum physics, and we all did.
Yeah, we all did. No, but what was so great about after I read the script is like Chris Nolan is also getting me involved very early. So one of the first things I do is, you know, he and Hoyte they're having test shoots, and and then they have screenings when you show some of the things that you're trying out. And I remember early on, I went to see one of those screenings at I think it was the IMAX 7mm theater. And I'm sitting there in a theater and I'm seeing this close-up image of like Cillian Murphy laying in bed. And I'd never seen anything like that. It's just such an intimate performance and an intimate capturing a face like that on such a format, and that had a tremendous impact in I think the way that I was starting to hear the music.
I am curious what it was like, because the IMAX camera is so massive. What is it like putting that camera right next to people's face? Because it is, you know, it's different than a normal camera, and I'm wondering how it affects people.
Well, it's not necessarily massive. It's loud. It's like having a small little diesel engine in the shape of a small minibar on the shoulder, you know. And it's, you know, for actors, I can only imagine how intimidating it must be. But it's you know, you have to kind of learn to switch yourself off, I suppose. You know, it's very, very intimidating. And of course, Chris and I decided that we wanted to be closer. We wanted to be more intimate than with that camera than we had, you know, than we had done before, which makes it even a little worse, you know. But I just have to say, all kudos to the actors that somehow understood, you know, the subtlety that a camera like that can pick up, you know, and could sort of do whatever they do, you know, in spite of the noise and the proximity of that beastly machine. And it's not only you know, the sound of the camera just here, but it's also, you know, my weird face very close in a viewfinder. It's just not obvious, but you know, Chris is very good at explaining the premises of what we're doing to the actors. You know, everybody knows what it means to, you know, to shoot on a big format like that, not only work-wise on set, but also the implications it has when you project it later, and what do you see, and so on. And somehow everybody is very much in on that game, you know, from the start, from the outset.
So I read that, you know, Chris gave you the hint of a violin, or he said something about he heard a violin. And so talk a little bit about what it's like having a director give you that sort of guidance. Is it something that you enjoy, or is it something that messes with you a little bit?
It's definitely something I enjoy. You know, that was the first thing that he said after I read the script. He's like, I don't have that much to give you right now, but I have an interest in seeing what we can do with having the violin channel Oppenheimer and his personality. And as I thought it was very interesting. I was like asking why, and he was explaining that the violin, with it being a fretless string instrument, you can go from, a super romantic, beautiful sound to something neurotic, and based on the vibrato of the violin, just within a split second, going between those feelings. So I thought it was it was a great start, and I knew. And also my wife Serena is a violinist, so we spent endless hours in the beginning just trying to come up with different techniques and also different ways of using the strings to channel feelings. And I think traditionally in the theater and when we see movies, the way strings are used in horror movies, for example, is like these big clusters, or everyone knows the psycho strings or these horror violin string clusters. But what if you take these clusters and instead of playing them like very, very intense neurotic tone, you make it with a beautiful vibrato instead? And what feelings is that going to make?
I'm curious for the two of you. Everyone in here is a fan of Christopher Nolan. What do you think might surprise fans of Christopher Nolan to learn about working with Christopher Nolan?
I think what I love with Chris and which is not always obvious is that his films always appear that they have a very high degree of precision, but I also, when I work with him, I feel that I work with a person that can also and is not afraid whatsoever to work in a very intuitive way. He has a very good sort of sense of things that are going on set. He has a very good sense of, he has always a very broad idea about what he wants to do. But when random things get fired at him, he always knows very good how to adapt, and and is somebody that is not afraid to go with a flow in spite of the precision of the work itself. And I think that very often people don't see him very much as somebody that can be very intuitive, and that very oftenly, kind of mistakenly, he's so much about precision and planning. But he's this kind of very strange hybrid in between that, because then you read the script afterwards, again, after the film is on the screen, and you realize everything is kind of written in it, and the scripts, they're then again, this precision comes back. But on set, and I think the actors feel very much the same, he's very open and very sort of reactive and responsive and intuitive,
Yeah, and also something I think that's very incredibly interesting, especially is his curiosity. To especially when I'm like in the middle of writing some kind of music, and I'm using some kind of if it's a type of composing technique or any kind of computer technique, like he's so keen on understanding what it is and learning it and really getting to depth of the craft. And I know that he's like that on every level, not just music, but in every different craft. And you can tell in the movies, obviously.
Yeah, or he comes back the next day and then has seriously read up on it and
knows more about it
than anybody else, But it's like with music. I mean, the same goes like the technology around it, like optics, camera technology, lab technologies, light. He always tries to know a lot about everything, and I always have the feeling that sort of amounts in you trying to better yourself as well, and into results that are always kind of interesting. Yeah. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially, I mean, also I'm talking about music, but also talking about sound. The amount of detail that he puts into the sound mix and into the dub stage, and have the knowledge of the subs and the speakers and like all of that, like It's a lot.
I have an individual question for you. How do you know, as an artist, when your piece of music is done? Is it like an instinctual feeling, or do you tend to go back to something even when you think it's done to sort of tweak it a little bit?
I try to tweak it a lot of times. And I mean, the only thing that I know that it's done is because we're running out of time. And also with Chris, we sit literally through the last day of the dub with the music. Like there was one cue that took forever to finish, and we finished it before the last day. We had to wrap the entire movie, and we just wanted, and also with Chris, I mean, we know when it's perfect, I think, or at least, or maybe. But I know when the music is down. I know when the cue is down. But like I'm always trying to push it and as much as I can and perfect it until the time is over.
Well, but there's a beauty to things that are not entirely done as well, right? It's when you for instance, it's always nice to sort of incorporate and not engineer things to death, and sort of at some point just accept this is what it's going to be, and this is what it has to be.
That's one of the hard things about this.
It's hard, but I think we very often walk away from, there's like shooting stunts, for instance, on set, and sometimes those stunts they're not perfect, but then you're sort of weighing, like every time you put somebody through a stunt, it's always a little bit dangerous, and it wasn't perfect. It wasn't the way you had it in your head, but the way it happened, it was kind of good as well. And maybe we should just stand on it and let this be exactly the way it is, and move away and move on. And I think there's some sort of a craft to that as well.
Absolutely, having that understanding is very difficult.
One of the things that people might not realize, or maybe they've heard about it, is that this film has no CGI. And you have there's incredible visuals in this that are being done practically. Can you sort of talk about making a film like this with no CGI and trying to photograph what he wants photographed using IMAX cameras or 65 millimeter camera? You know what I mean?
I mean, there's of course a distinction between CGI and visual effects. I mean, there's more than enough visual effects, but every effect in the film is based or derived from something that is shot tangibly. Sure. So every element you see is at some point committed to a camera, and there's some shots that are built up from several elements, for instance, But we always try to do things as much in camera as possible, and very often people think about that we do that out of some sort of vanity, but the truth is we try to do it in camera as much as possible, because every time we do an effect in camera, we don't have to scan it, and which means we can maintain the full 18K resolution that an IMAX negative can have. The moment you start scanning it, you already throw away half of the image quality that an IMAX frame can capture. So the fact that we do things in camera has a very clear purpose for us, and that is, we want to maintain as much as possible quality in the original negative.
I'll just say that, and I think the audience will also agree that when I see things that are just visual effects with a lot of green screen or lighting behind, it just looks fake to me, And I think the way you guys shoot your movies, one of the reasons it feels so real is because the practical nature and the analog nature of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, because it is very often not fake. I think it's just very hard to conceive a lot of things from the the luxury of a glass cubicle, and literally when you do CGI, every single element in the shot, including the highlight and the kick and the weird vibration that the table is doing. You have to invent that and you have to make that up. And somehow the human mind cannot compete with what nature gives us naturally on a way to do it. So for me, it's always very obvious that, you know, you try to do things for real if you want things to be real, and whatever you can't do, you work very hard to invent a way so you can. And if then you fall short, then you maybe resort in CGI. And you know, it's of course very dependent on what kind of films you do. But I think this film landed itself very well to, you know, trying to do things practically. You know, all these kind of things we're doing, they were sort of science projects in itself. And so, you know, doing that, you also learn a little bit, and you also have to invent a little bit things here and there, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and slowly you kind of, you know, study yourself forward through that complexity, instead of just, you know, conceiving of something you want to see and then, you know, putting a vision on the screen. It's much more something that is, you know, slowly cobbled together and comes a little bit from curiosity and want to learn, you know.
I'm going to ask each of you a question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for if the audience has some questions. So, like, Roger Deakins shoots with famously one camera, and Ridley likes to shoot with 6, 8 cameras. I'm curious, what is it like on set for you guys? How often are you using one camera? How often are you shooting things with multiple cameras? And I'm curious, in terms of the writing of the music, how much do you need to see the footage before you're really writing a lot? Like, how much can you write to the script? How much can you write to those first test shots? And how much is it like, I need to see the movie?
I think your biggest enemy on any of this is just time. So the more time you have to do anything, and the more time you have to write music, the better. Because normally when you finish shooting a film, you go into post-production, you'd make an edit, and then, you know, you have 3-4 months before the movie's done, before you have to finish the movie. So that's why it's so crucial to get started early. And because that's really when I think what's so unique is that we have a lot of time when Chris is in pre-production, 2 or 3 months before he starts shooting the film, we meet up once every other week or once a week, and I write music every week based on the script, based on our meetings, and we sit down together, we'll listen to it, we talk about some details, we talk about what characters they could work for, what sounds we like. So when he takes off shooting, when you guys take off shooting, he has about 2 or 3 hours of music that he listens to on set. And then sometimes he calls me from set and has notes. You know, this turns out, this is looking a little different now. What if we do this? And when he starts putting his first edit together with Jennifer Lame, the editor, they don't use any temp music. So temp music is something that is used almost in every film. When you make a first cut, you put in music from already existing films. But what we do here with Chris is that we put in music from the 2 or 3 hours of material that I've already written. And so immediately from the jump, when you see the first cut of the film, you have a whole unique sound world, a music world, something that's crafted and put together just for this emotion, for this feeling, for this movie. And then my job really starts, because I mean, we have a lot of music already in the movie, but now it's time to really craft it to the scenes and get the material that wasn't written, and like, you know, and also for this movie with this length, and you know, there's a lot of music that needs to come into place, and so for the last, you know, 4 or 5 months of this process, after we have a first cut, it's pretty much a heavy-duty job to get the music in place. And then also, obviously, the last thing that I do and that we do on this project is to record it all with the live orchestra. And especially for this film, which I would say like 80% of the music is played by a live string orchestra. and just listen and seeing how much of the music and the changes based of the live players, just the dynamic and really getting that human touch and the human element into the music really changed it a lot, because we were really able to play out the dynamics. And that, I feel like in music and most art and most theaters, and whenever you're exposed to music, you listen to radio, everything is always compressed to maximum level, just cranking it up. You see a wave file and it's just spikes the whole time. And I think with this film, sound overall, but also with the music, is something we're trying to do, is just really create something dynamic.
Yeah,
you remember?
I also love the fact that you turn up so often when we watch dailies, because we actually all watch dailies together. So also during the shooting, you're very often there, and in a way, get a little taste of the set and so on. So.
I see a lot. You watch dailies every day, and I try to come in there, even though it's no sound or no, there's no sign at the dailies, but just getting some visual and seeing the incredible footage that Hoyte and Chris have been getting is very inspiring.
Also, I'm sure it's an education in terms of learning filmmaking, and in case down the road you ever decided you wanted to direct. This is like the best film class ever.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, I remember I went to set one day and I saw they were shooting that scene in the beginning when Robbie and Oppenheimer are in that little train, and they're they're having a conversation, and that train it was tiny, that little train, and then you were standing. I think you were poking in with the window with your camera, it's a huge camera, and then Chris was. They built this little train cabin out of wood, and Chris was jumping on this stage to make it shake.
Yeah. Yeah. As well as it was not in a studio, but we happened to shoot at a location here downtown that happened to have a room, and schedule-wise, we had to do it that day. So we literally built that train set that is driving to Zurich in a room somewhere with Chris jumping on it and shaking
Real quick, because I do want to the audience, but I did ask you about whether or not, how often you're doing like the Roger Deakins method of one camera at all times versus the Ridley Scott method of shooting with like 6-8 cameras at all times.
I mean, it's safe to say that we're with a few exceptions of a dangerous stunt or a visual effects, we are one camera show. So we work with one camera and one camera only. We try to be meticulous with what we shoot, and as well as in a very old-fashioned way, you could say, but we work with an analog camera that has an optical viewfinder. So whatever gets into that camera, you look through it through an optical viewfinder. It has a very bad video assist. So Chris is usually resting next to the camera, looking from the vantage point of the camera into the set, and so everything that happens in front of the camera is all, it's all built around, that sort of funnel that goes into that one single lens. And I think we both love working like that. So we're definitely a one camera show. And by the way, to have two IMAX cameras next to each other, noising it up, that's...
Well, hopefully there will be a smaller camera soon.
I'm not sure if I agree, because there's something very magic with a fact that you have a set and you plant something in the middle, and all the life and sort of the chemistry on set sort of starts evolving around that thing that is standing central there. It's a certain respect and a certain all that people have around it, and they start sort of living their lives and building their things all around that gigantic vacuum cleaner there in the middle that is then supposed to suck everything up. So I think the size is not a problem, and then the other part of it is that I always feel it as my obligation as a cinematographer to kind of master the technology and the discomfort and the in order to get the best experience possible. So I'm not so much into like ergonomic or more handy solutions that make it easier for me to pick up or anything like that. I think it's good that there's a little resistance, and that always kind of works in my advantage.
I just have to ask the audience, how many of you guys have you all seen the size of like the huge IMAX camera that he's talking about? If you haven't, look on this thing called the Google and just type in IMAX camera and you'll see the size of what you are.
By the way, the IMAX camera, we all talk about it like that's the heavy camera, but the System 65 camera, the 5-perf camera is much heavier and much harder in a way to work with, because besides that it sort of pulls 65 millimeter strips of film through its mechanics, it also is built in sort of a case that is thick and heavy in order to not let any sound out. So the IMAX camera feels like a very ergonomic and easy thing to work with compared to the System 65.
I have never heard anyone say that the IMAX camera is ergonomic and easy to work with. These are I mean, literally.
No, but it's really not that bad. I mean, there's like all these myths about it. And when I started working for the first time on IMAX, everybody was saying like, "Oh, IMAX camera." And when I stepped into it, I thought it was like a Volkswagen Beetle or something, that big. And people say handheld is impossible, and then at some point you go to the rental company, you see the thing, you think, it's not that bad, and you pick it up, and it's not that heavy actually, and then you ask somebody to put it on your shoulder, and just by doing that, you find out it's the sort of the stories or the mythology around it is so much more than the camera itself.
I give you a lot of credit. There's not a lot of cinematographers that would rock a handheld IMAX cam. Anyway, so I'm sure there must be at least 2 questions out here. Let's start right here.
Yeah, well, thank you for your work. It was excellent. We love the film. I was thinking with the way that Jennifer and Chris cut the film, like it seemed like there was a lot of cutting around, and you both brought so much craft to it. Watching the final cut, is there a specific scene for either one of you where you went, oh gosh, that's just perfect? Like you have a favorite scene that reflects your work at the most aspirational before the edit?
Did you have, just so people can hear it, did you, and I want to make sure I got it right, but did you have a favorite scene from the way it all came together in the edit with Jennifer and Chris?
I think I remember the first time I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, it felt exactly like I was reading the script in terms of like, I know it was, I mean, you guys got it like scene for scene, just like the script is. And also what was interesting about that is that like even the script, Chris is writing out, it's like Oppenheimer hearing footsteps, it's in the script. Also, after the bomb goes off, Trinity test, there's the silence is in the script too, so it was a very interesting experience like that, because it's so close to the feeling I had when I read the script.
Yeah, also the cross-cutting and so on, because there's a lot of cross-cutting, like in its crescendos, it cuts away and it comes back into the action and it ramps up and builds up, and it's stuff that Chris always builds into script level. But that's kind of a nice thing with Chris, with working with him is, if you work with several directors, you read a script and then you have some sort of an image of it, and then the film gets realized, and it always meets your expectation, or it's just slightly disappointing somewhere at different points. But funnily enough, he takes always so good care of everybody's work, I feel, and you always totally recognize yourself back and the intention, and then he just knows always how to lift it, just that last little bit that that when you see it for the first time, it's almost like watching a new film, you know, even though it's exactly like it's in the script.
Okay, wow. We'll go right over here. Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering, is there any way to incentivize studios, directors, or producers to shoot more on film? Because I'm never watching the two good Godfather movies or Lawrence of Arabia and going, gosh, if only it had been digital.
Is there a way to incentivize studios to shoot more on film?
Yeah, I guess the one of the best incentives is to make a film and you know, make it interesting enough so that people actually go and see it in the theaters, and when they go to theaters, tell that they liked it, and you know. The proof is always in the pudding. So you know, I don't think you can force people to shoot on film, and I think studios, you know, obviously shouldn't force people to shoot on film. I think the only thing, you know, as a filmmaker you can do is shoot on what you love shooting on, and try to do it as good as possible, and try to, you know, connect with an audience like that. You know, that's kind of all we can do, and you know. Of course, I think it would be very sad to see film disappear because, you know, from a studio perspective, digital would be more interesting. I think it's very important to leave the choice to the media and have those choices of different media, you know, and leave that to the filmmakers, you know. And please don't force people to shoot on things that they don't feel comfortable with or like.
If that's okay, right here. Yes.
For the music, I felt it was super unique with the tempo changes, how quick and slow, and was there certain influences you had, Ludwig, on like listening to other composers or some music that sort of brought that about?
The tempo changes. That idea came to me during when they were showing me some tests that they had done, some visuals that were very inspiring. I was in an IMAX theater, and I saw them. They had just shown that test when you see the molecules swirling around, and I was sitting there in that theater, and it's like seeing that image on an IMAX screen, and that was incredible feeling. I was like, how can you get the music to have that effect? And then I know I wanted to mess around with tempo changes, but I also wanted to make the music feel like you can feel the tempo changes. And that was that took a lot of time. And also I used computers to obviously to do the tempo changes, but I knew that I wanted it to be performed by a live orchestra. And for the live orchestra to do tempo changes irregularly every 4 bars is very difficult, but we record them in a way that I've never done before, where you give them a click in their headphones before the tempos happen in the sheet music. And these musicians they were some of the best in the world, so they're so used to playing with a click in their headphones every day, recording music, and so they were able to do this, and I was baffled.
So does that mean that they played like the last bars to a different tempo in their ears?
Yeah, exactly.
Genius.
And that's the reason why the soundtrack is so incredible. Right there. Yes.
This is a question for Hoyte. I know that it's difficult to shoot dialogue scenes with IMAX cameras just because they're so noisy, but then I know there's like a good handful of scenes in the movie that have dialogue plus IMAX. So my question for you was, how do you choose like which scenes warrant like whipping out IMAX and using ADR versus which ones you're gonna go 70 millimeter or just 70 millimeter ready?
I mean, funnily enough, if we could have the choice, we would love to shoot a whole film on IMAX, you know, and it's exactly that level of intimacy that prohibits you from doing that, you know, and very, very soft-spoken dialogue, for instance, is impossible. However, if you feel that you really want to see on IMAX, then shoot it on 65.5 per first, and then when actors have it sort of in their muscle memory, you do a few takes on the IMAX camera, and then you hope kind of that the sound will be good enough and matches good enough so that you can actually, you know, show the whole scene in IMAX.
Let's go to the very back. Yeah, exactly.
My question is for Ludwig. I was wondering, you've worked with directors such as Ryan Coogler and obviously Christopher Nolan. I was wondering kind of like what's your process in changing your vibe or getting into like the vibe and thought process of the director behind the film for the
I think with both Ryan and Chris, and what's so important to the way they work is that they, like I mentioned earlier with temp score, they don't use temp score. That I'm getting involved very early because they're also writing the films themselves. So that allows us to get involved at a script stage where we can have these ideas and these experiments, and also working with directors that are very that are interested in music and have a musical ear and can distinguish differences in instruments and in the styles of music and are very interested in talking about it, because the more you can talk about it and the more you can elaborate on your ideas together and collaborate together, the better the product's going to be.
I'll go right there. White T-shirt, hand up. Yes.
When you're shooting or you're scoring the film, so you have like the scenes of Oppenheimer, then you have the scenes of Strauss. Is there like a different mindset that you're in for each of those scenes? Does the perception of the score when you're scoring change at all?
For me, yeah, the score changes. When we go to Strauss, the music, he has his own theme and his own instrumentation. So you might notice that we go into like the harp. And there's like a little Fender Rhodes and a harp. It's kind of plays a little bit of a mystery in the beginning. In the very beginning, when he shows him around Princeton, it plays kind of a sweet kind of sound because you don't want to reveal anything. But the deeper you go into it, the more you play the mystery and the feeling of it, and so you can notice when you go into those scenes that it's oftenly accompanied by the harp.
I just saw your hand, so let's right there. Yeah.
Hello. Been a big fan of yours for years, and you've worked with a lot of amazing directors and shooting for them and whatnot. And I'm just curious, is there anything you've learned on other films that you wanted to bring to this? And is there anything that you learned on this that you want to bring to future films?
Yeah, everything I could say. You know, it's. Every next film is a result of your previous film, and for me, like the prep for this film, you know, you have always like 12 weeks prep, but I think that the best prep you have for a film like this is was for Chris and myself, definitely the 3 other films that we did together. I think to sort of, be in tune, that has very much to do with your chemistry and, knowing each other's taste, and I think we rely on that so much more than, for instance, a concept that we come up with in a glass cubicle just 12 weeks prior to the shoot, the references that we pick during a day of shooting, they're almost always, back to stuff we've done before together. And I'm sure that is going to continue into the next film as well, I hope.
I just want to say that I've just noticed at the very end of the Q&A that I put his Collider mic flag upside down. And I'm super happy. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Ludwig.